the president of the Sarasota Audubon Society. And we all know why we're here today. And it's one of those days when you think we'll never come. And here we are. Owen? I have known Owen since about 97. When did you get here, Betty? Full time?
Before the turn of the century.
Before the turn of the century. 1999. And I had, Mike and I had come here about 2 years before that. And I bumped into Owen at the Celery Fields, of course, way before anything like this was happening. And we just hit it off right away. And how could you not with somebody like Owen? What an amazing, amazing man. And he was always a wonderful educator, a wonderful teacher. He had incredible patience with people. And he never ever dismissed any bird for being what sometimes we call trash birds. But he recognized and gave credit to every single bird. Years ago, he was on the board of Sarasota Audubon, and he did PR for us for a while. And we know that he had a very thriving and active career in public relations and publicity, and you'll know a little bit more about that. When we first started to get the funds together for this building, Owen was an incredible supporter of mine personally. And there were times when I knew it was going to be tough and maybe we should drop the project, but Owen always knew that it would happen. He was a great supporter of ours and a great ambassador for birds and for Sarasota Audubon, not only in our community here, but really for wherever he went. And I'm just so incredibly grateful that I knew him, and that we called each other friends. And he did actually see the building. He was around to see the building. I believe he was here at the grand opening, and he certainly was here at the soft opening in October, and that gave me a great deal of pleasure. I knew he wasn't feeling very well, and so I was glad to see him. And I just loved him, and we all loved him, and I know you all loved him. And there's really nothing more that I can say except that we miss him terribly. We're lucky enough to have a lot of photographs and DVDs and so on, YouTubes of Owen, so we'll always be able to see Owen. And I noticed him this morning on the TV screen there, and I knew what story he was telling. He was telling the hearing aid story. Many of you may have heard that story, where he was adjusting his hearing aids and it went, and one of the women he was teaching said, "Oh, white-eyed vireo." And there's one other, I have a joke that whenever I think about this joke, I think about Owen, because he was a person that everybody knew. Everybody. He was on TV, he was in the papers, he was just everywhere. And it reminded me of this joke of a guy named Sidney Glick, who everybody in the world knew Sidney Glick. And wherever he went, in New York or San Francisco, or in India, or in London, everybody knew Sidney Glick. And one day, the Pope wanted to meet him. And so he had an audience with the Pope. And after the audience with the Pope, they went out onto the balcony. And St. Peter's Square was filled with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And there were two guys in the back. And one of them turned to the other and said, "Was that guy with Sidney Glick?" That was Owen. Anyway, I'm going to turn this over now to David Comora, Owen's son, and he's going to tell you more about the life that is non-birding life, his family and his career. So here we are, David.
Thank you, Jeanne. Well, thank you all for coming out here today for this special dedication of Owen's Grove. Special thanks again to Jeanne and the Sarasota Audubon Society for the and the many generous people who donated to make this wonderful tribute to my dad possible. My mom and dad were blessed to be able to spend the last 17 years together here in Sarasota, where my dad first volunteered in Mayaka Park and then here in the Celery Fields, and shared his passion for bird watching with so many folks over the years, while his songbird Betty entertained the Sarasodians. Is that the right word, Sarasodians? I'm not sure. With her voice and piano, and of course with her washboard. So I thought just to give you an idea of his background, before he became known for his birding down here, he lived up in Paramus, New Jersey. He spent some 30 years commuting back and forth between from Paramus to New York City, working first as a young man. He worked prior to being in Paramus when he was in college. He worked on the Eisenhower campaign in 1952, doing promotion and publicity and advance work for General Eisenhower at the time. And he spent a summer traveling on the trains with Eisenhower and in planes with Eisenhower, and just having a wonderful experience. And that was in his junior year of college. And after leaving Utica College, he was hired by Young and Rubicam, a big advertising firm in New York, where he was doing the same kind of publicity, but now for television public relations, and that's what he did for most of his career. And so in the early part of his career, he was assigned to a guy named Alan Funt to promote a new show called Candid Camera, and then he was also assigned to a producer named Rod Serling, who had an idea for a television show that he would host called The Twilight Zone. And so Dad spent many days on the road with Rod Serling. They developed a friendship, and we have all these letters from Rod Serling where he was fretting over the fate of the TV show, thinking that it was going to be canceled in the first year, and would the sponsors renew it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it went on to become sort of television history, and it was a great part of his career. And later on, he was hired in, I think, 1964 by NBC to do the same kind of work, and he worked on some wonderful shows and was noted as being one of the most successful television publicists for the campaigns that he built around a variety of TV shows over the years, ranging from, I don't know if anyone remembers a show in the 70s, The Holocaust, where he created a wonderful campaign to educate students on the terrible time, and culminating in such great shows as Super Train. So there was a number of really wonderful shows he worked with, and some lesser shows. And then finally, in the last 10 years of his career, he started a company called Owen Comora Associates, of which my mom Betty was the only associate in the beginning. But as time went on and they started picking up clients and things became, they had a successful company. And he was lucky enough to be united through General Motors, one of his clients, with a new documentary filmmaker that they had teamed up with, who was about to produce his first documentary for public television, and that was Ken Burns. And so Owen and Ken Burns developed this great friendship, and Owen created these campaigns for the Civil War miniseries, and for baseball, and for shows Lewis and Clark. And I never really understood, as a young kid, what he did, but I saw the creativity of what he did with Lewis and Clark. It became very clear, where General Motors was the sponsor, and he put together this campaign where he took the television editors, Tom Brokaw, and all these people on the road, following the Lewis and Clark trail, and they did that in General Motors Suburbans and Yukons, and so there was that tie-in, and so it was very interesting, the career he had over the years. So,
What about Palisades Park?
well, that was more me, Palisades.
That was just David and me.
Yeah.
That was not Owen.
Well, years later, we produced a documentary in Palisades Amusement Park and Ken Burns was nice enough to come in and narrate that for us, due to my mother's request of him. So there were a couple of stories I wanted to share about my dad's bird watching hobbies. And he may have shared some of these with you, so for those of you who've heard them, it may be a little redundant. But the way he first got into bird watching was one day when he was in middle school. he went fishing in Hudson County Park. He took the bus down to Hudson County Park with his fishing rod. And as he was walking through the park, he saw this beautiful bird fly across his path. He had no idea what it was, but he noted that this was a pretty unique looking bird. He'd never seen anything like it. And then a moment later, he noticed a classmate of his, a boy named Ned Boyajian, who was standing with a pair of binoculars looking at some birds in the tree. And he went up to Ned and he said, "Ned, are you a bird watcher?" And Ned defensively turned around to Owen and said, "Yeah, what of it?" And he was like, "No, Ned, I saw this really interesting bird up there." And he described the bird to Ned, and Ned said, "Yeah, that's a northern flicker." And so Ned and Owen became good friends, and they would go to the park before school and look for birds, and then they'd head over to classes afterwards. And they continued to be good friends through junior high school, and I think into high school, but eventually they drifted and went their separate ways. And years later, my dad, who had a wonderful collection of birding books, happened to pick up a book called Familiar Garden Birds of North America and noted that Ned Boyajian was one of the authors of the book. And so I guess after my dad passed away, I was doing some research. I put together a little video on him, and I was looking for some cover shots and cover footage on the internet, and I came across that book, and I came across an email address for Ned Boyajian, and I sent him a little note, and not knowing if this was the actual guy. And the next day I got this nice letter back from him. It was in fact Ned, and he did validate that it was in fact a northern flicker. So years later, my dad continued and went on to Utica College. I'm wearing his hat. And at Utica College, he studied journalism. And by chance, he met a professor there who steered him onto a much shorter line, which was for public relations. And through that chance meeting, like through the chance meeting with Ned Boyajian, he wound up having a major change in what he thought he would be doing with his life, and got into the whole area of public relations. And so he told the story about, they didn't have dorms back then, and they all lived in boarding houses. And he lived in a boarding house, and one day he was looking out his window, and he saw on the rooftop across from him what looked like an evening grosbeak. And this was not a bird he had ever seen before. He'd only seen in the books, and he got very excited. He grabbed his binoculars, and he spent some time looking at the bird, and sure enough, it was an evening grosbeak, and it was a big new addition for his life list. Well, the next morning he left his boarding house to head to school, and he was confronted by an angry young lady who accused him of being a peeping Tom. And so he said, no, he explained to her, no, I wasn't looking into your window, I was looking up at the roof at the evening grosbeak, and explained that he was a birder. Well, apparently she bought into that story. That's the story he's gone with all these years. I think she actually wound up inviting him to dinner, so I guess everything was settled. But what was that?
They ate the bird.
They ate the bird. So, Jeanne talked a little bit about as he got older and started losing the higher registers of his hearing, he felt that he needed to invest in some hearing aids. And at one point he went to purchase the devices, and the technician told him that he could set the optimal register for the pitch of Betty's voice. And because he hears me the most. Oh, come on up.
Yeah,
Come on up.
I didn't know if I would feel like saying something, but I do.
Because I think this is funny. But it's true, he was really upset that he couldn't hear the upper register, all the birds. And so I went with him to the audiologist, and the audiologist said, "Oh, good that your wife came with you, because she's the person you hear the most. And so we'll set it to a register so you can hear her." And Owen said, "I don't want to hear her. I want to hear the birds."
And then came the famous trip to Texas, I think it was, where he started adjusting the aids and heard the loud whistling noise, and somebody shouted, I forgot what bird it was. Jeanne, you remember?
Well, I said white
bird is But yeah, it changed over the years. But he claims that his quick comical response to that was no bald-headed Jew. So that's a white-throated sparrow or whatever. So growing up over the years, there's certain things that only the children of bird watchers are exposed to, I think. There's the life list. He had a life list that was on this large format accounting paper. Had all kinds of strange codes on it, which I still can't comprehend. But it just lists and lists. It sat taped to the back of his bedroom door. There was another thing was the sudden jubilation as a new bird for the life list was spotted in the backyard. It was just a very exciting moment in the house. We didn't quite understand it, but we knew that this was an exciting event. And the ceremony when he had added it onto that paper. Then there was the intense shame of being the one responsible for letting the seeds in the bird feeder go low. So that's something that children will feel. And then, of course, there was the excitement of waiting to see how the squirrels would work around the latest squirrel baffle that Dad attached to his bird feeders. And they always did. They figured out a way to get by, and it was always a thrill. There were the robocalls that we would receive from the Rare Bird Alert hotline that could send my dad on a sudden trip across the country somewhere, where more often than not, he'd discover a group of folks standing on the same street corner with binoculars waiting to see this bird. And they'd usually see it. It was just an amazing thing. I was sure that the bird was stapled to the telephone wires, but it was an incredible thing. And then I remember one time Mary, my wife, before we were married, the first time I took her over to the house to introduce her to the family, my dad asked, there he is.
I think he
Well, my
approves.
fly was open, so that's...
The birds are still in the show.
They're upstage here. That's okay. That's okay here. So when Mary came over the house, my dad asked her, "Would you like to see me charm the chickadees?" And I got to say that I thought potentially this was going to be a deal breaker in our relationship. Because he went out into the backyard and raised his hand up with some bird food and started making this strange noise into the corner. I'm not going to do it here, but you all know the sound. And he stood back there for a minute or two, and suddenly these birds, wild birds, started flocking down to the trees near him, and then came and landed on him and started eating out of his hand. It was, I don't think I ever saw him do that. And I looked over to see Mary's reaction. I have to say, I was a little concerned. And she thought it was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen. So I realized that, we would be a good pairing ourselves. So, getting back to the reason that we've all gathered here today, it's really wonderful to meet so many of you who share the same interests that he did and to hear your stories. I look forward to hearing more of them. And I have to say, shortly before Owen passed away, he told my mom and myself that the one thing that he'd like to have would be maybe have a bench here in the Celery Fields dedicated to him. So you can imagine how thrilled we all were to hear that not just a bench, but a whole grove, Owen's Grove, would be planted over here. It was just incredible. And I know that he would be so thrilled, and he is so thrilled looking down here. I guess that was him coming in to greet us just before. So I want to thank you again for this wonderful dedication. Our family thanks you all for coming and for the generous donations that were made on his behalf. And we look forward to visiting this beautiful location in the future to see how Owen's Grove flourishes and how the rest of the park grows, and we'll be back a couple times a year to see that. So thank you all again. Greatly appreciate it.
This is the sister-in-law, Betty's sister. Everybody in Owen's immediate family has a little stone that we would like to put out here, and it's our contribution to Owen's Grove, and we don't know how long they'll be here, but we would like to do that today. But I have a story. Betty and Owen had come down to visit, and we went down to Springs, the
Mineral Springs?
yeah, Mineral Springs. We're standing in shallow water. I'm standing behind Owen. Owen is talking to a man from Russia. The two of them spot a bird 5 miles up in the air. and Betty and I are standing back here, and all of a sudden he turns around to Betty and he says, "Where's Oline? Where's Oline? Where's Oline?" He can find the bird all the way up there. I'm 3 feet behind him. Doesn't count. So, rock and...
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, if anyone has some stories or thoughts and would like to come up here and share a thought with us, we would love to hear it, because it brings him back for us.
Back again, because I want some credit, because I got Owen into volunteering because he didn't really think of volunteering as being a critical thing to do, because I've done it all through the years, since we were living in New Jersey and the kids are little. But anyway, we came down here and I got involved right away in volunteering in different places, and I'd come home and I'd see Owen watching TV. And finally, one time I said, "How can you sit there hour after hour after hour watching TV?" And he turned to me and he said, "It's a gift."
Kathy or Michael, I don't know if you, no, it's the shaking of the head. Any of the grandchildren? Any thoughts back there? Any of the, here we go.
I'm Cousin Billy. And I'm not going to need a mic for this, but this is how Owen got my wife and I into, it was a long time ago.
Hello.
And Thanksgiving was always at Betty and Owen's house. Mother would bring the turkey. And we're sitting there, it's after the meal, and the football games, there's a pause between the football games. All of a sudden, Owen stood up, ran to the sliding glass door with the big window there, and went, "Oh! A tufted titmouse!" I was like 6. I was just thrilled to hear the word tit in public. I said, what? And he pointed to the little gray bird outside there eating. It's November in New Jersey. It was cold out and nasty. And there was this little gray bird out there. So then we got the first bird book from him. But then years later, much later, married, living in Florida, we were on our way back from a rodeo. And I got home, I was thrilled because we had seen along the way back whooping cranes. And of course, anybody here seen whooping cranes in Florida? Yeah. You know where they are. You're not talking, are you? Nobody tells you where they are. Because once you see a whooping crane in Florida, there's going to be droves of people with funny hats going out there and looking for the whooping cranes. So Owen didn't know about the whooping cranes yet. We preceded him in Florida by decades. So I got home and I was thrilled. I got to call up Owen, and I called him up and I said, "Oh, and you never guess what we saw on the way home from Kissimmee?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "Whooping cranes." He goes, "No, you didn't." No, there are no whooping. I know where every whooping crane is in North America. There are none in Florida. And he was really indignant. And then about 45 minutes later, I got a phone call back, and he called and said, "I apologize, and I'd like you to take me there." He called around and he checked up on me. He didn't believe flesh and blood. No, he called her up probably. But thanks everybody for coming. This is really, really special to us.
Please.
Dick and I loved birding with Owen. We were in some of his classes and went to so many wonderful places with him and saw so many beautiful birds with him. But I just remember one day we were in Lido Park walking, and as we started, One of the participants had brought her grandson, who was about 8 years old.
Bring it real close.
Close to my mouth. Okay. One of our participants had brought her grandson, who was, I would say, about 8 years old, and he was, I think he was a little bit shy and didn't know whether or not he was in the right place, doing the right thing. Owen took him under his wing and took so much time with this young boy, taught him so much. At the end of our day with Owen, I mean, there was a real bond between these two. It was one of the sweetest things I've ever seen as to how enthusiastic this young boy was, how much he learned in maybe 2 hours with Owen. It was just typical of Owen, spreading his enthusiasm and his knowledge.
Yes.
Please, Joyce, cousin Joyce has come all the way in from San Francisco. Thank you. Gotta get real close here.
I grew up with Owen. We're the same age, within 6 months. He was my cute cousin. If I didn't have a date, I knew who to ask. But I remember stories in the Comora family growing up, because I lived with Grandma and everyone came to Grandma's every day, and I heard all the little gossip. But Owen goes and gets up at 4:30 in the morning and goes to Hudson County Park looking for birds. Everyone else is sleeping. Little did we know what Owen would become, aside from public relations. Last year, 2 years ago, I had a Comora reunion in San Francisco at my house. We went to Muir Woods. Owen had a gadget with every bird call imaginable on him. And we had a lot of kids, including my grandchildren. And whenever anyone would hear a bird, Owen would say, "That's a that call," and then he would mimic it. And he had that little thing also. So we had a wonderful time with Owen and the children going out to Point Reyes, Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and seeing the birds out there, as well as Muir Woods. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful reunion.
Thank you. Mickey, my brother, my big brother Michael.
Right up my nose. Hi, everybody. I was just going to say, I used to love going out birding with him, and a problem that I have is that I've learned how to mimic just about all the birds that we were watching. So it used to drive him crazy that I was standing behind him. I couldn't help it. It just came out of me. And a trip to Arizona when I was living in Tucson. And no, before Sage was even born, we got to see the trogon there, which is the only natural, indigenous parrot bird in America. And that was quite beautiful, finding it in Madeira Canyon. But you just had to look for the other bird watchers to assist it.
Steve, is there anyone else who'd like to? Oh, Leo, come on down. Leo Seligson, folks.
Thank you, David. Adrian and I met Owen and Betty 50 years ago, when the people you're hearing now were little as that, tiny. David, how big, well, old were you in 1950? Yeah, that old, yeah.
50 we were born.
Excuse me?
I'm a 62.
You were 3. Okay. And over the years, we have known Betty and Owen. There was a long period when we lost track of each other. And then, lo and behold, I kind of met Owen again through work, because he was doing PR and I was writing for a Newsday in the area of television and theater and so forth. And we became good friends when we found out that, lo and behold, Betty and Owen were down here. I just want to mention that gadget I remember when Owen got his iPhone and had, I don't know how many bird calls. And we couldn't go out to dinner without his pulling out the iPhone and listen to this, and listen to that. And that I always remember. And he's missed. What can I tell you? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we spent many holidays camping with the Seligsons and a couple of other families from New York State, but please come on down.
I'm Dick Paff, I volunteer with MyACA, and I work with Owen. And I had the honor of, Owen told me that I'm the first one to ever get him into a kayak. And the idea was, Owen, what do you think about a kayak tour? I did tours in MyACA at the time. He says, Dick, I've never been in one. So, and I think, Jeanne, weren't you on that?
No.
Wasn't?
No, thank you.
Okay. See, she doesn't know what she missed. Anyways, this has been a few years ago. I can't remember exactly. Long story short, the morning everybody arrived, 36 degrees. And we pulled up to an island, and we got Owen out of the kayak, because obviously you don't know how to get out of a kayak real easy. So we got him up on the island, and there he is, showing us how the birds fly. And it was really great having him on the water. And as we parted company, I told him, I says, I told you I'm going to make some money. He says, I've never been paid for something like this, Dick. So he got his money, and he was a happy camper throughout it without the money.
Well, anyone else who has any thoughts? Oh, here we go. How are you? Nice to see you.
Joanne and I met Owen just about 15 years ago after we retired. We went out to MyACA River and the state park, which we had always done, and we would walk out the bird walk and walk back, nothing out here. Well, this particular day, there was this kind of strange guy out there with a hat and a scope and binoculars, and he wouldn't let you off the bird walk until you had the lesson of the day. That day started a terrific relationship with us for 15 years. And I'm just so happy that I could spend that time with Owen. He taught me an awful lot. I became a volunteer. Thank you, Betty. What did your father call him?
Oh, I was going to say.
Yellow-bellied sapsucker. And getting into a little bit more recent history, we were visiting Owen in the hospital shortly before he passed away, and he was laying down in the bed, and there was a window with a kind of a very screeny thing on it. It's a wonder you could see anything in it. And Owen said, "Are those gulls?" And I couldn't see him with, standing up. Joanne saw him. And then when he was in hospice, we went, and he got out of bed, and he had to take us out and show us the porch and the little lake that he had out there. And he just never stopped teaching, and I'm going to miss him, as Joanne is. Thank you.
Hi, my name's John Robinson. I was the park manager at MyACA River State Park for over a decade, and Owen had a profound impact on that park. He was one of our most prolific volunteers. He got our bird, it used to be called the Bird Interpretive Program. We had all these signs made up that said bird interpreters, and Owen had to come and get all the signs remade because he got really tired of having to explain to people they really can't interpret what the birds are saying. So all of our signs had to be changed to say Bird Naturalist Program. But in addition to his volunteer hours on the bird walk and bringing in people like Yogi and getting them involved, he was the president of the Friends of MyACA River for several terms and had a really large impact on the park as a whole, and he's going to be missed in that role also.
If you could stand in the light.
Amen. Yeah, the light.
Step into the light.
Hi, I'm Betty. I'm just amazed to see how many people are here that really loved Owen. Owen was my Owen was my first cousin, and I just want to piggyback on something that Joyce said about her reunion. When we were all in Muir Woods, and I don't remember who was there. I know I was there, Michael was there, Susan was there. Were you walking with us, Joyce?
Yes, I think so.
Artie was there, and we all had our Tilly hats on. And Owen had his, I guess it was an iPod or iPhone or something, on his stomach, on his belt. And every time he heard a bird, he would make the sound. He would go to the pod and make the sound. So we had all of these birds following us. And we were all hysterical because then he would hear the sound of something else and he would switch it. So now we had these other birds following us. So it was really funny because I had never experienced this before. So that was Owen. And he taught me how to bird when I was younger, a little younger. And I just miss him so much.
And now you do it all the time.
And now, well, now I photograph them. I don't watch them, I photograph them. So, thank you.
And the photographs are actually
Elliot. Come into the light.
Okay, well, actually, you get better pictures over here. You do not, because the light is too bright versus what's over there.
Well, what the hell?
My name is Elliot Marshall Comora, and I have a little bit of a strange story to tell. I have two sides to my family, the Harrisons and the Comoras, and for some reason or other, I did not know the Comoras. But it's a pleasure. I came all the way from Coral Springs. I drove yesterday. I picked up Joyce Taylor at the airport. I went to shoot with Lynn Padley last year. And I'd just like to say that I didn't know Owen, and I'm sorry I didn't. And Betty and Mary.
Make up a story.
I don't have to make up a story.
No.
I'm
Thank
just
you for
speaking
coming.
from the heart, and I just wish I knew him because he seemed like a really nice guy, and I want his legacy to live on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Stan Nichol. Presently I'm the dean of the Pierian Spring organization. It's an adult education program in town. When we first arrived in Sarasota, I started teaching. I missed teaching. I loved it, and I got connected with this Pierian Spring Academy. And shortly after, they asked me if I would be the dean. And I said, "What does a dean do?" "Well, you go out and find the teachers." And immediately I asked Owen if he would be a teacher in our program. Well, in some ways, I mean, it was terrific, of course, but in some ways it was always a problem for me because the courses filled up immediately. His reputation had gone out, and he was one of the most popular teachers that we had. Then people would come into me and say, "I couldn't get into the class." I'd say, "Well, he's going to teach another course in the spring." "Well, that's too long. I want to be on some kind of a wait list." "Well, we don't have a wait list." "Well, you'll just have to sign up at that time." As soon as that course was announced, the next time, it was filled. And it went constantly. And what I loved about it, he always started out with a hearing aid joke. and every time I hear someone say to me, "I'm having a hearing problem," I see Owen. And I see him talking about that. The courses went on, they were very, very successful. They were incredibly successful. And I obviously, not only personally do we miss him so badly, but the program's going to miss him because of the fact that we don't have this treasured course in it that he taught. I will say, I just want to add one other thing. He saved my life one time. That was, my wife and I had decided to go to South Africa for a trip. And being a good organizer, she said, "I'll do these things and you do these things." And one of my jobs was to get the binoculars. We had just a little bit of a small opera binoculars, which was not going to work. We really needed serious binoculars. The trip was leaving on that Thursday, and all of a sudden on Monday, I realized that I had not done my job, and we were going to South Africa with opera binoculars. I called Owen in a panic, and I said, "You've got to save my life. I need some serious I need some serious binoculars. Bird binoculars will work, but can you give me a recommendation? And he said, yes, call up in Minnesota. And he gave me the name of a company and talked to Ben. And I called up to Ben and I said, Owen Comora has recommended that I get my binoculars from you. Can you give me some advice? And he said, sure, you need a X37J14 or something. And he said, I said, how much are they? Well, he said, you know Owen, so I guess maybe I'll give you a break. And he knocked off $150. And we ended up with 2 fabulous binoculars. The problem was, this was Monday. And I told Ben the problem, and he said, you know what? You'll have them in your hands on Tuesday noon. And by God, the UPS truck drove up at Tuesday at noon, and I forever thank Owen. And we would have been having serious problems without him.
Oh, yes. There is a guest book inside that we'd love to get everyone to sign. Where is it?
I think it's right out here under
maybe
the...
out front. So, yeah, before you leave, we'd love to have you sign into the guest book. And it's funny, everyone's talking about Owen's hearing, and I remember growing up, he never used to hear us. This is before the hearing aids. Except if we came into the house beyond our curfew late at night, somehow he would always hear, and we would catch hell for that. But anyway, is there anyone else who would like to say anything? Oh, here we go. Thank you.
And it's appropriate that you don't know me. I'm Mercedes, and I've known Owen for a very, very short period of time. And the reason I'm up here is because when I first met him, and I met him across the street doing one of his sessions on bird watching, and I liked him instantly. I mean deeply and instantly. That's the kind of human being I think that he is. And my husband and I, Jeanne, just love birds, but I have to tell you, I haven't appreciated them as much since knowing Owen. I mean, we have osprey around us, teaching their juveniles how to hunt, a hawk chasing a squirrel up and down the tree, and guess who won? The squirrel. And one day I'm looking at a documentary, and it's about the snowy owl. And I said, isn't that bird stunning? Isn't he beautiful? And then I looked and I said, he looks just like Owen. So I have to just thank you, Owen, for all of that. So.
Sage is one of Owen's 4 grandchildren.
The youngest. No, second youngest. Yes. I'm Sage Comora, and I just wanted to say, wow, like I didn't know how many lives he touched. It's amazing, and I know he touched mine, and it's good to see you all here, and I'm just thankful I got to have him in my life. Get to go fishing and birding and absorb all that wonderful time. So thank you.
Allie, come on down.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm Ben's Allie. Ben,
My grandsons.
Ben, yeah.
Love
My
son.
Owen was my favorite Comora. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm a crier. Grandpa wasn't my grandpa, and I was very honored to call him Grandpa. I miss him very much. I don't have any birding stories, but I do have a dog story. We have a dog named Mookie who we always said Grandpa was his best friend. And when we first got him, Grandpa would call him Caesar, which was his old dog. And about 2 years ago, we used to live in Tampa, so we would come down often. And on one trip, we stayed, and in the morning, Grandma said, well, last night I turned over to Owen, and I said, Owen, who do you love? And he says, Betty and Caesar. And although he's not here, I'm sure he's with his other love, Caesar. And we'll always miss him.
You're very official looking.
Well, my name is Teresa Good, and I work at Mayaca River State Park. And I didn't know Owen really well, but we did know each other. And it's kind of funny that you say I'm dressed official, because Owen was really the famous one. It sounds like I never knew how famous he was in his younger years. And but the thing I do remember about Owen is how kind he always was. Even though we didn't know each other well, but we did know each other. Every time I would see him out at the park, he'd always have a group of birders with him, showing them around the park and showing them the birds. But whenever he would see me, he would treat me like I was the famous one. He would tell all his friends like how great I was and how great we did, what a great job we did running the park and everything. So he really always made me feel really special in front of his friends, and that's how I'll always remember him.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great, Susan.
I just wanted to, I'm Suzanne Dermon, and I have worked with communications for Sarasota Audubon here throughout the campaign for the Nature Center. And early on in the campaign, before the Bird Naturalist program started, there was not as much recognition of the Bird Naturalist program that we had here. And so Owen said, well, let's, he's the one who founded it, he said, let's do something about this. The first year, because we kept count of people who showed up in the naturalist program, the naturalists are on the boardwalks from 8:30 to 10:30 every day. And they had 3,000 the first year. And so Owen and I worked together on this, and we laid out a campaign, and we reached out to the media, and they loved it. They loved the stories, they loved coming out. And the next year, during the months of from November to April, it had tripled. We had 9,000 visitors in those 2 hours. It has continued to climb, and I know it's because of Owen's touch on that campaign. One of the things I'm realizing now is that one of the features about the Bird Naturalist program is that Sarasota Audubon naturalists are there every single day from November 1st through the end of April. It is the most robust Bird Naturalist program of all the chapters in the state of Florida, and Owen set that up. So there's much. So in addition to having a fabulous program and wonderful bird naturalists, we have the best.
Thank you. Linda and I had the great good fortune to land in one of Owen's classes, and I mean, his just unbridled enthusiasm for birding inspired me to get my telephoto lenses out and start doing some bird photography. And yesterday I got a call from Audubon magazine that one of my photos is the professional division winner. I was an osprey. I was photographing it off a dock on South Siesta Key, and the osprey was taking off, and you can just see the bird's eye and beak through the wings. It is a dramatic photo. There's a lot to be said for timing.
Terrific.
Just want to, anything? Any stories? Fishing? Captain Mike? Does anyone else have any thoughts they want to share? Oh, come on down. Thank you.
One quick story. I'm Mark Davis. I used to deliver babies. I have no birding credentials. I had the pleasure of birding and meeting Owen at Mayaca and here probably 2 or 3 dozen times, and it's always a pleasure. I never met Roger Torrey Peterson, who basically invented birding. He wrote the first book on how to identify them without shooting them first. And I remember reading an article. They interviewed the top 3 birders of all time, of which Roger Torrey was one. And the question was, what got you interested in birds? And his answer was the flicker. He was walking in the woods one day, and there was a bird on the ground, just a drab gray bird, and he thought it was dead. And he reached down to touch it, and it exploded in a splash of color and just changed his life. And so I didn't know him, but I knew Owen, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Gordon Giddings. I've been a friend of David's since I think we were in 7th grade. I just want to say that when you're young, it's very important that you can have a place to go where you feel welcomed. And when I went over to Betty and Owen's house, they always made me feel welcome. I didn't speak a lot with Owen. We didn't have a lot of conversations. But it was nice to know he tolerated me, because not a lot of people did that. And it's important when you're young to be tolerated. And I didn't really know about his birding, but I have perfected an Owen call. But I can't do it for you now, because I'm too embarrassed.
Do it.
Eddie, come here, I need you. Eddie? That was when they had an intercom that never picked up the first syllable.
Yeah, it was very, my friends all got a big kick out of that as we were growing up when they were visiting, and they were running Owen Comora Associates out of the house. And my mom's office was upstairs and Dad was downstairs. They needed it. But it was Eddie. So anyway, just a quick closing thought before we get to the dedication. There was, my dad had some sayings that he was famous for in the house growing up. Aside from Jesus, Betty, and so there were certain things that we heard over and over again. But one of them I always thought was fitting. I thought was fitting for today, which was at the end of the day when he was ready to go to bed, he would say, "I'm going upstairs now," and we know he's up there looking down, and we all are so thrilled for this day and for this remembrance of him. And we know he's upstairs, and he'll be looking down here forever, and we'll always have a place to come to remember him, and we thank you all for that.
Well, wonderful. I'm so glad that we were all able to share those stories and be involved in this tribute to Owen. It's just amazing. Betty, I know it's been hard for you, but you look back on this day and think how wonderful it really was.
Gina, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We did put a brick down for Owen, by the way, over here. So for what we're going to do now is walk over to Owen's Grove. It was planted just recently, so it's saplings. You have to imagine how it will be. And there's a ribbon there. And what?
I just have one thing.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I just have one thing to add because I love Jeanne. She's so terrific, and I know they were very, very close friends, Jeanne and Owen. And we would go out to dinner once in a while, and her husband, Mike, would come, and I would come, and Mike and I were the two SOBs, the spouses of birders.
And you did that very well, and so did Mike. You were very good in those roles. Okay, there are some refreshments over there also. After we've gone over, anyone can come along. It's follow the pine straw path along there. And Betty, we've got a scissors for you if you would like to cut the ribbon.
That's exciting.
And then we hope that you'll all come back and see Owen's Grove as it grows and flourishes. Thank you all for coming today. So, with great pleasure, we dedicate this grove of trees to Owen Comora, and we hope that you will come back and visit when the trees are flourishing. And now, Betty,
There'll be also a bench.
there'll be a bench here and also a plaque commemorating Owen as well.
Which is wonderful.
So, are you ready?
Never did this before, folks.
You
can do it.
You can do it. Yeah.